Hello and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. We are carrying on with looking at the pre-constructed decks from the Nemesis expansion. In this video I'm going to be looking at Eruption, which is a red and white deck. So let's go and dive into that. So we have a deck list here, 21 creatures, 5 instants, 1 sorcery, 6 enchantments, 3 artifacts, and 24 land. Mana curve off to the side there as usual. Let's dive into looking at some creatures. So a big theme of this deck, well, yeah, I suppose it is the theme of the deck, is the new Lackey creatures from Nemesis. So there's kind of a lot of these guys. A few were left out, but there's a sort of a progression of them here. Lacklith Whelp, Lacklith Grunt, and Lacklith Warrior. These all have the Lacklith ability, which means that if they attack and are blocked, they instead you can choose them to have do damage equal to their power to another creature, but if they do, they don't do combat damage. So basically, if you block them, they just shoot someone anyway with lava, I guess, spurting out their body. But Whelps are 1/1, Grunts are 2/2, and Warriors are 3/3. And I just think they're fairly solid. For like red creatures at the time, that's like a pretty good ability, just being able to shoot wherever they want. It forces hard blocking decisions on the opponent, I guess, because if they block something, they're kind of putting another creature possibly at risk. Which is, yeah, I think that's just a fun ability. It's just a shame there's only kind of like 3 of them in this deck. Well, not 3, but 3 different ones. So Nemesis also brings back the Flowstone mechanic, which was used in Tempest Block, because the fluff of it is we have gone back to Wrath, which is the plane on which Flowstone was a thing. So the Flowstone mechanic, as we can see here on Crusher, is just you spend a mana and it gets +1/-1 turn. Crusher again is actually a fairly good red creature, I think, for the time. Like a 5 mana 4/4 with no drawbacks is actually pretty good, which is depressing to say, but it's the truth. And the Flowstone ability I think is pretty good. It allows it to punch up if it needs to be, or if it's unblocked, you just put a load of mana into it and do more damage. Yeah, that's all right. And then Flowstone Overseer is one of the rares of the deck. So it can do the Flowstone ability on any creature for double red. More often than not, that's going to be used as like a removal ability, kill off enemy X1s. But you can use it on your own creatures as well to kind of sneak in extra damage. But yeah, Flowstone, I think that's pretty good. Like, again, 5 mana 4/4 with no drawback, which it shouldn't be a selling point, but it is. And then we have a few more red creature. You have 2 Spell Shapers. Talked about Spell Shapers a lot while looking at these Masks block. Basically, you pay a cost, discard a card, and they shape that card into a signature spell. So Chris Mage is pretty weak, in my opinion. Just does 1 damage to a creature or player. That's not great. Technically, it's a 1/1 for 1 with upside, I guess, but like it's a pretty weak upside. And then Archmage, 3 mana for a 2/2, and he does. Well, it's not quite Arc Lightning, is it? It's there's got to be a red spell. Forked Bolt, let's say, is does 2 damage divided as you choose. That's all right, I guess. He can potentially 2 for 1. Yeah, and then white creatures, we have Chieftain Endal. This guy's actually, I think, pretty good. 3 mana for a 2/2 when he attacks. All attacking creatures get first strike to end of turn. I think that's actually fairly decent. Not much to say. Just, I mean, combos with all the Flowstone abilities. And then Trap Runner. 4 mana for a 2/3 tap. Target untapped, unblocked creature becomes blocked. Such a weird kind of a way to word that ability. You could just say like, target unblocked creature doesn't do any damage this turn, but yeah, it's just a very weird way of wording that ability, but it's fine. I guess it stops damage, which is the important thing. Then a few more white creatures. Defender Envec is a 2/4 for 4. Has Fading, which is a mechanic that was introduced in Nemesis. Basically, when you have a creature with Fading, you only kind of have a limited time to use it. Because every upkeep you remove a Fading counter, and when you can't remove a Fading counter, it gets sacrificed. This guy, I think, is part of a cycle where they use it's a creature where they use their fade counters to pay for an ability. So Defender and Vet can just like prevent a load of damage, which is all right. You know, it's free apart from the fade removing the fade counter. It's free to use, so that's all right. It's just kind of okay. Oracle's Attendant is the other rare. 4 mana for a 1/5 tap. All damage that would be dealt to target creature this turn by a source of your choice is dealt to Oracle's Attendant instead. So I guess this was kind of a thing of its time that, like, you know, you usually have like these white bodyguard creatures where they redirect damage onto themselves, and they usually have high toughness. Yeah, it's fine, I guess. It feels like a little too slow because I think like this is a red-white deck, so you kind of want to be aggressive. That's like what red-white does really well. This just feels like a little too slow to be in the deck, personally. But then you could use it, I guess, to save your more valuable creatures, I suppose. Yeah, I don't know, just feels a little out of place here. And 2 alabaster walls, which are just walls that tap to prevent 1 damage. Again, like fine, kind of boring. And then another wall, Crenulated Wall, which is 4 mana for a 0/4 defender. Tap type creatures get +0/+4 until end of turn. This makes a little more sense just because of like the Flowstone creatures. So you could buff up their toughness, and then you could then spend more on the Flowstone ability because then they won't die. I guess it also has synergy with like Oracle's Attendant to mean it can tank more damage. The things that Oracle's Attendant, going back to it, like it only stops damage to 1 creature from 1 source. Yeah, I don't know. It just as I say, it just feels a bit weak, just a bit out of place. Then a whole bunch of white utility spells. Civi's Ruse, 2 colours and 2 white, to prevent all damage that we dealt to creatures you control. That's quite good, like a one-sided damage prevention. And also, if an opponent controls a mountain, you control the plains, you can play it for free, which is all right because, you know, like at 4 mana, I think like a one-sided damage prevention is quite expensive for 4 mana, but obviously being able to play it for free if the conditions are right is okay. So it's kind of the middle ground there. Seal of Cleansing. So this is the white member of like a cycle of seals that are in Nemesis. Basically, they come down, they're enchantments, and then you can sacrifice them for no cost to do an effect. So Seal of Cleansing basically does disenchant. I talked about this with Seal of Strength and Seal of Banishing. I think it's Seal of Removal in the previous video when we were looking at Breakdown. I think it has some advantages and disadvantages over like being able to just play Disenchant from your hand. The advantage I think with Seal of Cleansing is that you can sort of like pay 2 mana, you drop it on the table, and you can just leave it there until you need it. But obviously then your opponent's aware that you have it. So it can serve as a deterrent, or they can kind of bait it out. I know it creates some interesting choices, I suppose, and like I think they're different enough they can be considered differently. But just in case you don't want to use Seal of Cleansing, there's a disenchantment here as well. There's also an Inviolability, which is an aura, prevent all damage that we dealt to enchanted creature. That's quite strong, and actually combos quite well with Oracle's Attendant. And Ramosian Rally, this has been in sort of like most of the white precons so far. It's basically +1/+1 to your whole board, but if you control planes, you can tap an untapped creature you control instead of paying its cost, which is good because, again, like 4 mana is quite expensive just for a +1/+1. And then some red removal, so Downhill Charge, 2 colours and 1 red. Target creature gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the number of mountains you control. If you don't want to spend the 3, you can sacrifice a mountain instead of paying its cost. Has anti-synergy with itself, because if you sacrifice a mountain, then it's obviously less effective. but like as a buff spell, I guess it's okay. Doesn't It's obviously feels a little weaker being in a two-color deck where like half your land are going to be plains. So I don't think maybe the best inclusion in this deck. Really, with this, you want it to be giving, I think, at least, I would say at least +4 or +5 to make it worth it. Like anything less than that, it's too expensive for its cost, I think. Thunderclap is 2 cards in a red, do 3 damage to a target creature. Again, you can sacrifice a mountain instead of paying its cost. I think that's a little more useful having a burn spell that does that, because if you are tapped out and suddenly a creature comes down and you desperately need to kill it, at least you have the option. Volcanic Wind is like kind of a nice big sweepy damage spell. 4 cards and 2 red. Sorcery does X damage divided as you choose amongst any number of target creatures, where X is the number of creatures in play. That's quite strong. You're playing a deck with a lot of creatures in it, so every creature on the board basically contributes 1 damage to this, which you can then split however you want. I think this is actually pretty good. Obviously, it's very expensive, but has the potential, I think, to do like some really like big plays with it. And then 3 of the red seals, Seal of Fire, 1 red enchantment, sack it to do 2 damage to target creature or player. Again, like the other seals, you can just drop it on the board and then it's there if you need it. Like, you don't need to keep 1 red mana open. If this was Shock and you had it in hand, you would need to leave red mana open to cast it, but this at least drop it down until you need it. That's fine. A single flaming sword. It's an aura with flash. Target creature gets +1/+0 and first strike. A little boring, but I think perfectly fine. Like, having flash makes it like a lot more interesting, because then it's like a semi-decent combat trick, I guess. Just giving something first strike out of nowhere can really mess things up. Belby's Armor. So this is just a big old mana sink. 3 mana, X, tap, target creature gets -X/+X until end of turn. Again, like fine, like another sort of defensive card in a deck that weirdly has quite a lot of defensive cards in it. It's okay. It's like reverse Flowstone ability, I suppose. Yeah, I guess it's okay. I'm not, again, maybe going a little overboard on kind of having like damage prevention and stuff like this. I don't know. It's okay. Iron Lance, 2 mana, artifact, 3 tap, target creature gets first strike turn. That's very expensive for what it does. Yeah, I think that's a bit weak, honestly. And then Flowstone Armor, on the subject of being expensive and weak. 3 mana, you may choose not to untap it during your untap step. 3 tap, target creature gets +1/-1 as long as Flowstone Armor remains tapped. This is kind of like proto equipment, I suppose. Interestingly, this can be done to opponents' creatures, so it could be weird, janky, repeated removal to get rid of X1s or make them weaker. But yeah, overall, I think it's a pretty bad card. So what could have been? So there's a few cards, I think, from Nemesis and Mercadian Masks that could have like found a good home in this deck. Flame Rift was just like a big burn spell from Nemesis, just does 4 damage to each player for 2, which is like really aggressively costed for like a lot of damage. Furious Assault is whenever you cast a creature spell, it does 1 damage to a player. So you're playing a lot of creatures, makes sense. Lightning Hounds is just a 3/2 with first strike for 4, which is just a fine creature, I think. War Cadence is kind of like the opposite of War Tax that we've seen a few of. This basically, you pump mana into this and creatures can't block that turn unless the controller pays X for each blocker, which is okay. And again, it's like an okay mana sink. Lackey Titan. I think this, and like you've got all the Lackey's, I think this guy should have gone in. So 7 mana for a 6/6. And he has the Lackey ability, so he can just, if he gets blocked, he just shoots something else for 6 damage, which is quite fun, I think. I quite like the Lackey's. I would like to. I don't know how they would ever return, but like I think it's a fun ability. And then I was umming and ahhing about this Parallax Wave. So 2 colors and 2 white enchantment. Fading 5, you can remove a fade counter to it's not blink something, it's kind of temporary exile. Basically you Oblivion Ring it. and when Parallax Wave leaves play, everything that was exiled by it comes back. I think this is like potentially quite good because you can drop it, take all the fading counters off it straight away, and then just like basically take 5 creatures out of the way. So that could be potentially like, oh, you swing, and they're down 5 creatures to block. Yeah, I don't know. It could have gone in, but yeah, I think the rares in here are sort of okay. I think Oracle's Attendant, for as out of place as it seems, I think it still makes a bit more sense than Parallax Wave, but I would have preferred to see Lackey Titan. So yeah, in summary, I think it's okay. This deck, I like the Lacklith creatures. It's nice seeing sort of Flowstone come back, even though Flowstone is kind of like a little bit janky. But yeah, overall, I think this is all right. Just kind of middle of the road. Doesn't do anything like particularly badly. It's just kind of a standard red-white deck, but it does, I guess, it does feel like it's kind of pulling in 2 directions. Like one half is trying to be quite aggressive, and the other half is just having quite a lot of damage prevention. So yeah, I don't know if it's as refined as it could be. But yeah, what did you think? Did you ever have this deck? Did you play with it? What changes did you make to it? I'd really like to know. Stick a comment below, and I'll be back next time to look at another Nemesis pre-constructed deck. But until then, thank you for listening and watching. Have a good day.